Hi, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela with BlueBearFlutes and BlueBearFlutes.com, our website where we sell the latest and greatest Native American flutes available on the web today. Actually, also some of the least expensive ones today, and some of the few that are actually Native American made by Native American hands. Anyway, today's video is one that both flute players and flute makers alike will be interested in. It has to do with tuning, but probably not what you're thinking. It's not how to tune a flute necessarily, although I guess it's about 50% how to tune a flute, but it's basically tuning the flute and the temperature that we deal with in our shop. Now I'm going to tell you, I've got a thermometer, a digital thermometer in front of me. I'm staring at it. If I always look over there, that's why. And the reason I keep my eye on that thermometer is because the temperature that it is right now determines how I should tune the flute in order to make it play at 440 A at roughly 72 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And the reason this is mildly important is because that is the consistency that most people consider to be accurate. And for those of you who think they're confused about what I'm saying, or it sounds like gibberish to you, let me explain. When you play any instrument in one temperature, and then not only when you take it to another temperature, but when you play it in a completely different temperature altogether. Let's say you used to live in the Pacific Northwest and then you moved to South Florida. The flute or instrument is going to play differently in one area versus the other. It's not just acclimating it to that weather, okay? So in other words, if I were to tune a flute at 75 degrees Fahrenheit to 440 A, and then you were to take it to Canada, for example, if you took it to Canada, it's going to play flat because of the temperature difference between there and here. Likewise, if you took it to London, the temperature difference between 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which it is not right now by a long shot, I don't know if you see the sweat on my shirt, but 75 degrees Fahrenheit is just our standard. It's like 440 is just a standard. You know, something can be a flute in the key of whatever, and many of you know about 432 and 440 and 528 hertz, and many different tuning frequencies that people think is so critical to existence. Although with my sarcasm, you can probably guess what I think about all of it, which we have an upcoming video about, by the way. But anyway, in regards to that, if I tune a flute and it's 75 degrees Fahrenheit and I tune it to 440 A, let's say it's an A flute, and you took it to London and it's not 75 degrees Fahrenheit there when you play it, and it could go for anywhere, by the way, of course, North Dakota, but if it's colder when you play it there, it's going to play flat. And likewise, if at 75 degrees, which once again, that is 20 degrees ago, it didn't reach 75 degrees last night, it was above that here in the southeast of the United States. But the purpose of the video is basically not only to make you aware that different tunings are affected by temperature and weather and lots of stuff like that, but it's also it's different everywhere you go, so there's a lot to take into consideration. We're going to explore that, go through the process, and for flute makers, you need to know this, because I'm going to show you how to tune a flute if it's 96 degrees as it is right now. I'm going to show you how to tune a flute that way and still make it at 440 A at 75 degrees. And that's critical because that's how we do things. A lot of flute makers, they will only tune their flutes if the ambient temperature of their flute making shop is at a certain level. And while that is a consideration here in the South, my electric bill is already quite high as it is, so you can't imagine what it would take to cool a building of this caliber. I mean, we use swamp coolers, and you may hear a fan in there in the background at the moment. We turn those off and on during videos, depending on if we're sweltering and really dying from heat exposure or not. But anyway, long story short, the flute will tune out differently at different temperatures, and of course in different countries, as I mentioned, at different pressures. So in some places like Peru, the temperature may be the same as it is here at sea level, but because their barometric pressure is different, because of the elevation, they may experience a whole different sound with their instruments. So that's some things to take into consideration. Something else, like I say, to take into consideration is the temperature. And there are a number of facets of that we need to talk about. A lot of flute makers, like myself and many others, work in either an open environment or they work in a non-temperature controlled workshop. A lot of them work in their garage. If you've bought a flute on eBay or Etsy, and even a number of websites, and even some pros that are very good at it, you may have bought it out of their garage. That having been said, I'll never forget how laughable it was when I was younger. When I say younger, I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and I seen somebody had made a YouTube, or not a YouTube, I think this may have been before YouTube, made a eBay listing, and she said she always tunes her flutes at 72 degrees, and I'm thinking, well, that must be nice. I'm living here in the southeast of the U.S., and 72 degrees is a nice, cool summer night, or maybe a nice, cool winter day these days. But anyway, it's not completely necessary to have a climate-controlled area in order to tune your flutes properly. And I've been doing this for almost 40 years now, so I don't want you to think that I'm an authority on anything. I'm really not. I'm not even really an authority on how to be Charlie, for that matter. Life's changing on a daily basis, but I have had some experience with it, to say the least. So that having been said, I want to discuss with you a few things that impact the tone of the wood and tuning, and also the challenges that we have with those kind of things, and maybe give you some advice if you're tuning the flute. And if you're a flute player and you're not really interested in making a flute, you may want to watch a lot of this anyway, because it's going to tell you something about your flute and how you play it and where you play it that you may not have known or may not have guessed. So first off, we all agree that most everything expands in the heat and contracts in the cold. Some things, I know water, it has an unusual tri-point, which is some wonderful second grade scientific terminology that I remember from those days, of them telling us why it is that hot water freezes faster than cold water. Forget that. It's not water we're talking about. It is just everything else. So the wood does expand and contract in a temperature, and that will change a few things. One of the things that really has an effect on is how the block sits on the flute. So if the block is on there nice and tight, and then you take it out somewhere in the heat, it's very possible that the leather has expanded and the wood has changed shape and everything else going on, that it may have loosened up the flute block a little bit. So that's something you need to consider. For that reason, when I play my flutes in hot weather outside, I usually go back and retie all of them if I'm playing them. So just FYI, if you're a flute player, that's a really good word of advice if you haven't experienced it yet. And if you have experienced it, great. But like I say, the cold, on the other hand, for a flute player, doesn't affect your flute in that particular way. It does affect it, but not in that particular way. It's true, while the wood can shrink a little bit, if you've got a leather tie on it, or something as crazy as this rubber band that I'm only using for tuning, it should be okay. But I've had leather lace loosen up in the wintertime due to the fact that the wood itself shrunk. So even though the leather lace shrunk, it shrunk at a different temperature and a different rate than the wood did, and that's something to consider. So the wood expands and contracts, and that will affect tuning. If the block moves, if it's loose, that affects tuning. When the wood is warm and the actual grain of the wood itself, or the material, the molecules are looser and changing the shape and size and these kind of things, affects it in that particular way. That's one thing. But as far as the tone of the flute, that is all air. And once again, flute players, this is something you want to know about. Air actually has a great deal to do with the tone of the flute. So I'm looking at this flute right now. If you want to see the range that it's in, you can see it's a very flat B. Now, that very flat B is at 93 degrees Fahrenheit, which is really hot. And this is the morning here in the southeast, so keep in mind it's only going to get hotter. Those bottom three notes are almost on the same frequency range as the bottom note. The bottom three fingerings are really close. Now I'm going to show you a little trick here you can do. What I'm doing is tuning down, it's called. I'm actually calibrating the tuner. Let's go down 2 more clicks. How about let's go to 432. Now, don't all of you get the idea, oh, that means that's magical. No, it just means that that's how big the flute was at the time that we tuned it at this particular temperature. If it was 35 degrees in here right now, that intonation would be all over the place. But because of how extra long this flute is, and that's sweat, by the way, on my finger, just for reference, but because of how much extra long this flute is, that's what frequency it's in at the moment. Does that mean that the flute is in tune for 432 right now? No, because it's 93 degrees Fahrenheit in my shop at the moment, and if I stare at it for just a few minutes, it's going to be 94, because at the time of the morning it is right now, we're at the transitional period where the temperature starts raising. That's usually between 10 a.m. and then usually at around 4 or so. It has to do with the sun. You guys can figure all this out on your own. And greenhouse effect, by the way, and I'm not going to say chemtrails have anything to do with it, but we can get into that in a later video maybe. But all of this stuff has to do with the temperature, and the temperature has to do with the flute, and let me tell you why. This is the thing that most people miss. It's the air. So regardless of the heat changing how the block sits and whether it's loose or not, and the expansion and contraction just like a guitar, any of that is significant. However, the air is really, in our case, the thing that makes a difference. With a guitar, you'll notice guitarists are always, I'm watching that temperature now to see if it's going to go to 94. I know it's about to. But with a guitar, the temperature of the strings actually causes them to expand and contract differently. And because of that, that's why a guitarist goes into a different room and they always have their tuner on them so they can get it in tune. With this instrument, we can't exactly tune on the fly like that. There's a few things you can do here and there, but you really need to play it at a consistent temperature to get a consistent tone. And in a moment I'll tell you whether that's significant or not. But for right now, I want you to know that the air inside of the flute, whether when I'm blowing or just the fact that it's in there, you can see it in there right now if you look really hard. You see that air in there? Yep, it's in there, just trust me. But the air inside of it is what's controlling the tone. To a degree, that happens with the guitar. Now, the guitar's body, for example, it can be a different temperature, and it may react a little differently, but if the strings are the right temperature, it's going to play in tune for the most part. The one thing that the body of the guitar does, if it's a different temperature than the strings, and I don't know how you're going to accomplish that, but maybe you have some electric strings. That's not how an electric guitar works, by the way, but maybe if your strings are heated, that's going to change their tone. But the body of the guitar, in the case of our instrument in here as well, the body of it also affects the air temperature. And that's one thing that, once again, we'll set off on the guitar notion right now because that's where we kind of go in a different direction. The temperature of the flute itself causes the air temperature on the inside to be different. If you've never seen this before, take an ice cube out of your freezer and set it on the counter and see if any steam comes off of it. See if you can feel coldness above and around the ice cube. You do, because of radiant energy and how the ice cube is absorbing the heat from around it. And I'm trying to tell you this in actual scientific terms instead of layman terms where we think that ice is making the air colder. Anyway, if the flute is cold, if you just took it out of the freezer and you play it out here in 73 degree weather, still 73, I mean 93, not 94 yet. If you do that, it's going to play in accordance with some degree to the temperature of the flute itself because it's affecting the air temperature inside of it. That's so important. So hot conditions can temporarily raise the pitch of the flute. In other words, if I was playing this 432 flute in my 74 degrees house, it would actually be playing flatter than it is right now, because the heat outside, the heat inside of the flute causes the tone of the flute to raise temporarily. And flutes that are tuned in hot weather, like this 93-degree heat that I'm talking to you about right now, can actually cause them to go flat if I took it into my 94 degrees house. And many of you, excuse me, get my temperatures all mixed up, 74 degrees house. Many of you have it 72 degrees in your house, and I've personally talked to customers who keep it 69 and 64 degrees in their house. I wish we could do that here in the South, but our electric bill would really resemble the GDP of a small country if we did. So 74 degrees in my house, it's 93 degrees out here right now, and this flute, based on its temperature, is playing a perfect B at 432 pitch, which is wrong. So the challenges of making a flute in the heat like this is it does affect your building materials, your tools, your glue drying if you're using glue on your instrument. It affects the wood, of course. Wood that is glued at a colder temperature, like back in the old days when I'd glue a flute together, which this one's not glued, it's drilled out, but if I glued a flute together and it was like close to 0 degrees Fahrenheit outside, my glue actually wouldn't dry, it would freeze and the flute would come apart. But that doesn't happen in the heat. It loves the heat, and as a matter of fact, the hotter your glue is before you stick it together, usually the better it sticks and the better it dries, and to some degree more gradually. Sweat and humidity also affect this. So if you're outside playing somewhere like in Miami, for example, and your fingers are real sweaty, you could actually affect the tone of the flute. And I'll tell you a couple of ways. Anytime you get a droplet of water on that fingering, it actually makes the fingering smaller in some ways. It doesn't change the size of the wood, although it does cause the wood to swell a little bit, but that's not what I'm talking about. If there is a water droplet that is around the outer edge of this fingering here, it can actually cause that to restrict the air escaping from the hole. So that's something to think about. Something you can do to prevent this is tune your flute at 72 degrees, which is not always fathomable here in the South. It's not always something we can do. I mean, there are limitations. My dust collector is usually running and it's pumping any cold air that's in the shop outside. You can use fans. You can change the temperature with evaporative coolers, which we use. They do actually change the temperature, which is good. I've watched the temperature on that thermometer go down. And I keep pointing at this thing. I know you've seen it in the video, but that's why I'm staring over there. It's actually 93 right now. If I hold it long enough, it'll be 94 in a split second. But you can work in the shade. It is cooler in the shade than it is out in the heat. Avoid storing your flutes. If you've got a pre-made flute and you're a flute player and you're worried about playing it in tune, which once again I'll have something to tell you about that at the end of this, you can avoid storing it anywhere in the heat. Don't set it up in the car windshield. That's terrible. It's going to crack a wooden flute. Don't leave it in a hot vehicle. If you do, my suggestion is put it in something and set it under the back seat or anywhere that you can that's lower, because heat rises and cold usually stays a little bit lower. You can also work in the mornings, which is something that we try to do an awful lot. One thing that you can do also is, if you had stored the flute in a warmer place than where you're working or playing, you can let it acclimate before you decide to play it. That's something you want to think about. Don't try to tune, if you're a flute maker, don't try to tune the flute immediately after it changes temperature, because it's going to be one way and then later on it's going to be another way, and that's something you got to consider. That's the reason there's a thermometer right there in front of me, a little digital thermometer, and that's also the reason that I don't typically tune my flute tuner down. I usually leave it at 440, and I'm going to show you right now as I go to tune this thing, but I usually leave it at 440 because I can extrapolate and I can see. If you'll notice, you seen the change of the pitch, that little needle there? I watch that thing like a hawk. My wife watches it. You know, we're on top of that and the temperature all day long. When it gets up to 100 degrees, we have to tune incredibly sharp so that it comes back to 440 when it's in your 72 or 75 degree home. So lots of stuff to consider. So let it get down to temperature before you decide to start tuning. Let it get to whatever, you know, if you've stored it cold, you know, let it get warmed up before you start tuning. Let it rest basically, and then the tuning part of it I'm going to show you right now, because this is the real trick. It's the real key. And I keep expecting it to be 94. I'm surprised it's not, but it's probably because you may hear my evaporative cooler. I mean, it's really hot, so we had to turn that guy off. But let's go chop the bottom of this guy off and get it up to where I know 440 is at 93 degrees, and then we will. Something else you want to consider is the thing that's making noise here may also throw off your pitch, because my tuner, while it's not responding right now, the closer I get to the tone that this bandsaw is in, the closer it wants to tune to the bandsaw's tone. So that having been said, I usually don't set my tuner right here. I usually set it on something flat in a relatively quiet location, but I'm going to do this here so you can watch me cut it. At 93 degrees, that's close, but let's check it out with the saw off and see what it sounds like. At 93 or 94, really 95 degrees, I want it between this dot and that dot, and I'm actually going to sand the bottom of it anyway, so this is perfect for how much I needed to cut off of it. So just for reference, this is the amount of difference between 440 and 432 at 93 degrees. So, and once again, it was 432 on the tuner, which was not accurate. It's actually closer to I'd say 426 or 427. If I had taken this flute in somewhere that it was, you know, 74 degrees, it would have been closer to 427 on the tuner. Once again, just kind of see this stuff in my head. Tried and true. I've been doing this for 40 years, so if I took a flute that was tuned in my shop at the temperature and using our methods and took it in somewhere at 74 degrees, it's going to play in tune, which is great. Once again, don't forget, at the end of this, I've got to tell you something about tuning and importance and significance and all that kind of jazz, so we'll talk about that. So, kind of sounds like these fingerings are still in tune. I can hear that they're a little flat now, but we're going to remedy that right now. This is the next step. You've noticed I've got my burning rod here hot, and what I'm going to do is let you watch me burn the hole. You can watch it on the tuner, and while you're doing that, I'm just going to burn each one of the fingerings until they get to the right key. We'll go through that kind of quick so that you don't have to sit here and watch a flute making video if you're a flute player. But like I say, you do want to know about that little piece at the end. So check the tuner out here. Okay. Maybe this will be easier for you to see. Now, something I'll tell you too, this burning rod is actually changing the temperature of the fingerings, and you notice the smoke coming out of the flute. The smoke is a different temperature, although and I hate to confuse any of you, but any of the nuclear scientists out there that are watching this, or fluid scientists, I realize that smoke is actually a cooling item. It's got hot air in there is what I'm talking about. But anyway, the smoke in there, the temperature of the wood itself is different because I'm using a burning tool. So now that it's actually cool to the touch on all these fingerings, we can get a more accurate reading. Let's see what that looks like. That one needs to go a little bit more. So that's why I usually blow the smoke out of the flute before I start playing. One other thing too is that smoke is denser than air. This is kind of obvious. If you were to draw a box on a white piece of paper and then draw another box just like it on a white piece of paper, and you color that box in with a very light gray crayon, you'll notice that one of those two boxes is darker than the other, and that's because of density. So this one, the third fingering is still a bit flat, which it usually is. Very close. I'll go ahead and burn these other two holes while I'm at it, just to get them started, because I know my flutes, those two holes are going to be bigger. There we go. And just for reference, it did just go up to 94 in here, by the way. FYI. The difference in intonation between 92 degrees and 95 degrees is almost infinitesimal, so it's not a major concern. But once you get to a certain threshold, you got to watch what you're doing. I'm going to go ahead and make that one just a pinch bigger. So the top hole's almost right, just a tiny bit out. This hole, as usual, is where it needs to be, a little bit bigger. This one, just a pinch bigger. If you'll notice, I'm only burning the inside edges of the hole right now. And also, I'm slipped up and let you see me put the rod in this hole and go around in circles. That's really a bad idea. It can break the wood if you do it too vigorously, but if you're just very gentle and the rod is incredibly hot, you should be okay. I do that before I use the next size up graduated burning tool, which usually we would have out here, but I probably ain't going to need it on this one. So all the holes are right, except for the second from the top, which I'm going to take care of right now. If you'll notice, I'm using my metal rod here in a different fashion. I was going up and down inside of the fingering really quick because that actually puts more of the heat from the rod onto the wood and causes it to char the wood off faster. That sounds really good. I want y'all to watch me play it and let's see what it sounds like. I'm going to do one more thing, and I want you to watch this too and tell me the same flute, as you notice. You'll notice it's 440 right there. That's because I'm using a very weak amount of air flow. I've covered this in numerous other videos, but for those of you concerned, that is important, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment too. And mind you, that is not what I was going to share with you. That is the most important thing that I'll tell you at the end of the video. Watch it one more time. Now, most of you may not be able to figure out, especially if you're a layman musician, that those notes were incredibly sharp. Let's go ahead and tune up. I'm going to tune it to about 446 and see if that's close to where I was at. It's not. How about that? I can blow harder than I knew. So if you notice, I tuned it all the way up to 450, and that was showing that it was in tune. How is that possible when I'm playing? Well, I was blowing incredibly hard, that's why. Once again, I could tune my tuner down, which isn't something you need to do. Like I say, not if you're going to make more than one or two of them. And you see that it was showing a flat C. This is why I tell many of you, this way lies madness. And even if you've made hundreds of thousands, an unfathomable amount of just this flute alone, you know, it still can give you a problem. And that's where a lot of people go ahead and use, you know, climate-controlled rooms and what have you. We do things a little differently here, and we always have. You know, my dad had a workshop that was outside when I was a kid, and it was in the shade. He had a fan, and that was really about it. Now, he didn't tune flutes, but with that mentality, that's how I grew up, and how my granddad was too, by the way. He had the same workshop. I don't think he had a fan, but he had a nice breeze where he was at. So that affects how the flute is in tune. And now I'll play it right here for you so you can see. So, you notice it sounds good. And, well, before I tell you that secret, when you all hit the off button or thumbs up, I hope, before I tell you that, I will tell you the one other thing. Very much like the smoke that you've seen here, there's one thing I didn't do that I almost regretted not doing on camera, but it would probably have confused you because we need this video to flow a certain way for the information to sink in properly. I did sand the bottom of this, as I told you. I was going to cut the bottom off and I was going to go sand it. I did that. And one thing I did after I sanded it was I took my air valve and I blew the inside out. I started up here at the sound hole because if I blow from this direction, it'll blow most of it that way, and it keeps it from lodging itself underneath of the track. That's just something I've learned to do with experience. But something else I did was I came in and blew it from the bottom because at that point most of the air, most of the sawdust was tiny, and it did blow out some more. Most of it did not lodge under the track, and this, I could blow like this and not see any sawdust come out. So after doing that 10,000 times, I don't always do it. But anyway, so if you're wondering why there was a cut scene between what happened just a moment ago and right now, it's not because I needed to get a refresher on my notes, or we had a discrepancy, or the flute did something. It's because the camera overheated. That's what the difference is. So, by the way, 96 degrees now. It is not 11 a.m. yet. So, anyway, the long and short end of it is that anything that goes into the flute, for example, sawdust, smoke, anything like that, can change the tone of the flute. If the temperature of the air inside of the flute is different, it can change the tone of the flute. If you just drank something cold and you're playing the flute, that cold air is blowing through here, and I would really love for those nuclear or fluid technology scientists to explain why it is that I can blow cold air. But anyway, that was actually a joke for all the laymen. I understand why, but I'm not telling you. Anyway, the most important thing is that you know that restrictions to the flute, for example, I can restrict the bottom of it and it'll make it go flat. Sorry you had to see my legs there. I didn't have anything else I could cover with. But if you put sawdust in there, it can make it go flat. You notice that the sound quality of the flute was still the same. So if I looked inside of the flute and it wasn't what I, as a perfect human being, consider to be perfectly round, then as long as it sounds good, that's what really matters. And that's kind of getting down to the thing that I wanted to share with all of you out there, especially flute players. I'm going to quote something, and it reminds me so much of a lesson that I've got here for all of you. I used to have a friend named Chief Bobby Johns. He was a Creek Indian, and I used to do some programs with him. And one of the things that he used to say, and back in my youth, I mean, I was like a teenager then, it used to just royally make me mad. He would say, "Charlie, just play the flute." And I knew what he meant was I needed to get on with it and stop talking so much, which is what most of you are thinking right now, I'm sure, except for that guy that just clicked the button, but because he's out of here. But no, really, if I didn't tell you, you wouldn't know, and that's why this is so important. But what Bobby Johns used to say of Charlie just play the flute is important. And so those of you who are out there, the first thing you do when you get a flute in hand is you take it to the tuner and you're like, oh, you know, and especially you beginners that do that, I just don't understand the logic. You're missing a little something. And I'm not trying to, you know, display my passive aggressive nature or whatever any of you might believe. I'm just telling you that that's not what it's all about. It's not about this thing. I do this because this is my business and my livelihood. And I learned how to tune at 96 degrees and how to get it perfectly in tune so that you're happy. And if you think that you ripping a flute out of a box, taking it into your 65-degree house, and playing it for the tuner as fast as you can is going to make it play right, and I'm sorry about that, but you had to hear it because that's how I envisioned it. But if you think that's going to make it play right, you might be just a pitch off. So intonation is important. If you want to go and take this in a studio next week, and that's why you had me ship it to you quickly, or if you're in a certain southern, southeastern area where there's a lot of people who tend to like to ask for things to be shipped quickly so that you can get it quickly and so that you can call your credit card company and tell them you didn't like it quickly, in time. Anyway, if you're interested in doing that quickly, you may have missed the whole point of things. Let it acclimate to the temperature in your house. I mean, it's been shipped inside of a UPS truck that doesn't have air conditioning right now, and if it does, kudos to your UPS guy, because my UPS guy doesn't have it. And same thing with USPS or FedEx or anybody like that. You know, some of them have AC, some of them don't. Even the ones that have it tend to not use it for a number of reasons that I'm aware of, but I don't have to share here with you. But in any case, the most important thing is playing the flute. That's the trick. Learn to play it and not worry about intonation. If you play it and it sounds like this, then maybe something's wrong with the instrument. But if you play it like this, and you think to yourself, I wonder if that's spot on 440 with my 1 week playing skills, you know, as I showed you on the tuner, you can actually make the flute go higher and lower. If you're interested in playing with a guitarist, back in the day when I first recorded a few albums, I actually had my guitarist tuned to the flute, and it wasn't my idea, it was his idea. He's like, you know, let's just tune this to your flute and play like that. And I'm like, okay. And we did, and we turned out some amazing stuff. And if you sat and hold a tuner to the song to see if you're enjoying it, then I'm sorry, but you're crazy. But if the flute is off one way or the other, it may be you're playing, as I showed, is a different frequency than. And I can do that. I've been doing this for a minute. If you can't do it, then it's possible that you're blowing in a little too fast, and that's really the other key. That's the mathematical, computational, hands down, robotic, this is Terminator territory stuff. That if you want to play this flute in tune, you need to learn how much air to use, because if you're playing it like this, it's not going to play right. And if you're like this, it's not going to play right. And I've actually had one of those customers just recently, by the way, and she's a good customer. I'm certainly not going to share her name, and it's just experience is what it boils down to. But she received one flute, and she's like, "This flute's too squeaky." I'm like, "You're using too much air." She, "I know what a good flute is." And I'm like, "Okay, let's trade it in on a different one." And she's like, "Well, this flute's perfect." And I'm like, "Is it because I sent you the Instagram video of me playing it before you seen it, before you got it?" I'll let that sink in for a second. And she's like, "Okay." And I sent her a private video because I'm not here to hurt somebody's feelings. I sent her a private video and showed her the flute that I sent her, and she's like, "Wow, that's amazing. I had no idea." You know, and it's because she was using too much air. And once again, not trying to embarrass anybody, hurt anybody's feelings. I hope that that helps you learn that you can change the tone of this instrument yourself, and you may be inadvertently doing it. That is so politically correct. I'm one day going to stop this whole political correctness, and I'm going to tell you how it is. But for right now, because I love my customers, except for that one in that south region I don't love. Is in tune at 440. It's 74 degrees in my house. Out here it's a little sharp. So I hope this has helped you. Once again, I hope that flute players and flute makers alike have learned a little something that might benefit you. And in any case, I hope you're all doing well. And I hope that one day that guy in South Florida gets his. South, wherever he lives. But in any case, I can judge by the smile on my wife's face that it's time to let you go. And once again, Charlie Mato-Toyela signing out for BlueBearFlutes and BlueBearFlutes.com. I hope to see you very soon.